One of the things that I'm much more hesitant to do with the garden plots is to make something more permanent. So this is case in point with the cattle paddle greenhouse. It's not to say that it's permanent, but it's permanent enough that I can't just simply move it. I can unscrew it and move it, but that'll just take more time and effort. So when you have something dedicated to this, you had the anticipation that it was going to serve some sort of role. So in my case, it was going to serve more of a germination tunnel, maybe some sort of growing to it. Not so much in the summer because I know these things get too hot and there's not really a nice way to ventilate this sort of thing. It is tied down here. So it was going to be very seasonal at best, but I still thought I needed it at the time. Now using it for 5 years, it's pretty much been now just collecting all sort of stuff. So is some use to it, but because these bushes or trees grew a lot larger, I don't get as much sun. So I would say it gets too cold in the winter and too hot in the summer, and those extremes I thought I could still manage, but it didn't really kind of play out the way it needed to go. It still has some sort of use. I'm still attempting to grow. So this is mid-December. It is still keeping the lettuce alive. Maybe not so much this one, but stuff is still growing into it, but certainly not to the level that you can eat something out of it. So this is more just a test, seeing how much I can get out of it, but I don't have high expectations for this. So what happens when you want to extend your season, but you have something more permanent? It's not giving you the sort of value and expectation that you had. And how do you have something more flexible that still kind of works with your sort of setup? So I'm going to switch to another plot and kind of show you the happy medium that I'm using in between something more permanent and something more flexible. All right, so this thing that you see in shambles here is our version of the cattle panel greenhouse that is now more versatile. Kind of looks like a low tunnel or caterpillar tunnel. Whatever you want to call it, it is something that we use to extend our season, or in our case, try to get to 4-season gardening. So you see many different versions of this, and this is the option that I use simply because it provides more versatility to what you have versus, say, a cold frame or using rebar. So you can build up a cold frame in the sense of putting wood, build a little rectangular box, put a little frame on top of it, be done with it. I've seen people then put PVC tubing on top of that, put your tarp over it, be done with it. But if you needed to go to a different bed, you'd either have to move your rectangular box, or what people then use is then the rebar. So they would just line their beds with rebar, put your PVC tubing into that, connect it over, put your tarp on it, and then be done with it. The problem that I have with both of those, it's a little bit more permanent in the sense that the wood is difficult to move, and the rebar, although movable, still needs to be pounded in. And then if you needed to move and you had something like a 20-foot bed and you had 20 rebar in there, well, then you'd have to move 20 rebar to the next one, or you just buy a ton of rebar. But rebar isn't the cheapest option nowadays. So my version of those iterations is using landscape timbers and 3/4 inch plex tubing. So plex tubing is for plumbing and heating application. It comes in a big roll. You can buy 100 foot of it for about $50 at Home Depot and Lowe's. And since it's already circular, you just cut it to the length that you want. So this is a 4-foot bed. We probably cut 6-foot length. You can get a significant amount of your hoops out of that. And then once you have your 3/4 inch cut, you then do a 3/4 inch hole into the timber, and you essentially just plug that in. So this is flexible. There's nothing moving, there's nothing holding this down. And once you have whatever length you want to build, you then pull your tarp over it and be done with it. So in my case, we just dolly them up. So we have three sets of 2 timbers together to form the hoops. In the back there, you see that. I think there are 8 sets of timbers, so you can go as long as you want. I haven't had any sort of issue with weight kind of pushing the tarp down, but back there I do have PVC line that connects all those. But nonetheless, I've never really had too much issue. And if you can see the difference between this one versus what I showed in the greenhouse back then, this is the same lettuce planted at the same time, and now you can see that putting the lettuce where it can see the sun more is more conducive to the growth. So having something not appropriately in the right place really will hurt what you're trying to achieve. And in this case, I couldn't really move the greenhouse, and it's just much easier to make these sorts of things. So what I like about this, I have many different garden plots or garden beds. So in this case, I have 4 20-foot beds, and instead of having to build one greenhouse that would just sit there and only serve that sort of purpose, I can just move these very easily. So once we start getting into the spring and whatever lettuce has made it through the winter, if I want to transplant, say in February or March, I don't have to build anything new. I literally just pick this up and you just move it over. So 2 people can just move one set at a time, even if you didn't have anybody to help you. These things easily pop out, and then you just push it back in to be done with it. So it's very versatile, it's very flexible, you can move it wherever. So instead of having 4 different tunnels in this bed, I can just have one, and I can just serve it for one purpose in the winter and then transition it as I need to with the subsequent transplants in the spring and the summer. So this beats out, so in this case we have 1, 2, 3, 4, so about 3-4 hoops per timber. Each timber is about $5, so you're looking at each timber with your hoops on it, I would say close to what, $15-20 at most. It's very cheap, it's very easy, it's easy to take down. The only thing maybe bigger the hassle if you have way too many timbers, so I have probably about 50 timbers. It's a bit much, but it's easier just to kind of throw them on the side and be done with it. And then once you move them, then your bed is as usual. There's nothing permanent to it, you don't have to change anything with it, and you can just go on with it. And once you have your hoops in, you pull it over. You can tuck it under depending on how level everything is and how much space you have in between your timber and what you're growing. So that can go up and under, and as long as everything is level, the timber will also allow that to pinch. I'm experimenting kind of with different ways of doing this, so I'm just being efficient with my time, and I'm just using whatever excess wood I have over there. So I just pull everything over, put something heavy on top of it or loop it under, then you're done with it. So I don't have to do anything specific. So this has survived 40-50 mile per hour winds. I have no issues with the tarps pulling off. There's no end wall that I put anything here. I just pull it enough to get to a point where I can put another piece of wood and just done with it. So if I needed to pick a big batch of lettuce in the winter when it's cold, I just pull the end wood off, pull it back, pick whatever I need to, close it back up, and be done with it. So just wanted to share this. This is certainly a much more useful option for someone that's looking to have a little bit more versatility, that doesn't want something more permanent or doesn't have the space for a larger greenhouse to have a much larger scale, but has enough land that you can't just be building these things by the dozens to kind of fit everything on one of these on a bed. So hope this helps. It has certainly helped us, and we'll continue to use this.